Lisa works in Belize. Lisa is a one-woman show in Belize with a great team behind her, but she has been the driving force of the restoration program there. The work that you are going to see Lisa talk about today is, I think, some of the most successful restoration work that's been done in the Caribbean. When I need a photo to go to that shows amazing restoration before and after, it's not the hard part is finding which one of Lisa's photos to use. But I know I'm going to one of Lisa's photos. The work that they have done is amazing. They have taken sites that have been completely barren and turned them into completely amazing reef restoration projects. And they're not just working with one species, they're working with multiple species. They're focusing on making sure the other components of the ecosystem come back as well and not just the corals. There's some really, really exciting work. And it is being done using some of the most low-tech methods that are available. And when I first asked Lisa to come do this talk, it took her some cajoling to get her even to come to the conference. When I first asked Lisa to do this talk, I originally kind of entitled it as kind of Shove Your Grand Challenge. And the reason I did that was because we're spending a lot of time this week talking about big grand challenges, audacious things, X prizes, new great things. And those things are all going to be really important to the next step. But we also can't lose sight of the fact that some of the simplest techniques have produced some of the most amazing results to date. And you don't need to have robots. You don't need to have all these amazing tools at your disposal to have really amazing restoration successes. And I think as a community, it's important as we think about those next generation restoration tools that we remember that not everywhere in the world has the resources to employ those next generation tools. And Lisa and her work is testament to the fact that you don't need a lot of amazing tools. All you need is some dedication and making sure you choose your sites appropriately, and you can get amazing results. Lisa?
Good morning. Thank you, Tom, and to everyone else that plugged us yesterday. I really appreciate that. This photograph is of Laughing Bird Key National Park. That is Ian from Oracabessa Bay in Jamaica, and in recent years, we've been focusing on exchange trips because no talk, no video, no publication can really share our story. You have to come see it in person. So please, everybody come visit our sites, as seen as Belizeing. I'm not going to get through everything. I know that already. So this photograph is a nursery-grown elkhorn coral outplanted in 2011. We know that it spawned twice for sure in 2016. And thanks to Nicole Fogarty's group in 2017, we know that all the gametes are actually viable as well. And there's a little Spinosystemis crab, who I hope I get to talk about later. The three things I want to make sure I get across are coverage. How do we talk about our results? The language that we use needs to be standardized, as well as the methods that we're using to standardize it. I want to emphasize we've always been in the shallow areas. We started with elkhorn coral, reef crest, fringing reef areas, super shallow, and that we do have science backing up all the work we're doing. And of course, I want to emphasize our community involvement. I had a short video that was supposed to come right now, sorry. So we started the work after Hurricane Iris in 2001 as a Category 4 hurricane, and everything looked like this around Laughing Bird Key. These are all, again, nursery-grown outplanted corals at Laughing Bird Key National Park. So how do we measure this? How do we share these results? And the fish are a whole nother story. How do we quantify that? But what I really want to get into is how do we talk about the coverage and the extent of regrowth that we're getting. The top photograph on the left-hand side is an actual photograph from the 1970s near Laughing Bird Key, near Placencia, showing both the elkhorn and the staghorn together. And the bottom photograph are all, again, nursery-grown outplanted corals at Laughing Bird Key. When I first began, and you heard Buki mention, what are we aiming for? We have shifting baselines, right? So my point of this photograph is that we can actually restore back to a high level of coral cover, but we can't do it everywhere. So we have to be really smart about how we pick and choose and put our energy and time. And then the photograph is showing, the main one is showing erosion that was affecting a restroom at Laughing Bird Key National Park. And while we have some tools to sort of quantify the important ecosystem services like tourism and fisheries value, We're lacking the tools right now to really quantify the shoreline protection value, and that is, again, one of the main reasons we're working in the shallow areas. So we've been mapping often during the hottest months so we can identify the stronger genets or genotypes, individuals that are not bleaching or not affected by disease. And our strategy has been to put multiple genets together in close proximity so that when they spawn, they have an opportunity to have cross-fertilization and make more baby corals. And we have documented that spawning. So hopefully you can tell with your naked eye, there's 2 different staghorn genets in the top photo. Then we have a prolifera, the hybrid, and a staghorn. And on the bottom, you have 2 different morphologies of elkhorn or phenotypes and genotypes, and they actually hold that in any condition, as well as different bleaching histories. So we are doing the genetics on both the host and the symbiont and tracking the history of Belizeing disease over all these years as well. I'm not going to go through this, but we have a manual online that shows all of our site selection criteria. There should be a video showing now. That is available on fragmentsofhope.org in our manual, so you can download our site selection criteria for both nurseries and outplants. But I want to give kudos to the Belize government. They've protected the parrotfish and the surgeonfish as grazers, and MPAs are an important part of our work as well, no-take zones. Angelfish are often overlooked, but they eat the hydroids and the sponges, and they're also an important part of an ecosystem. So very quickly, there's a map of Belize. I'm in southern Belize. I've been there for over 20 years, so this was not a master's thesis project or a one-off idea. I'd already been there for 10 years. You can show the video now, please. Before I began the restoration work. I think I have a video here, right? Yeah, so part of our new site selection criteria tool is from Dr. Claire Paris, who has taken our mapping data and done a computer simulation of a larval spawn. So I can't go into this, it could be a whole nother talk, but we want to add this to our toolbox. I just got this information so that we can pick and choose which sites we're going to restore based on what's not already being reseeded from the extant acroporids. I hope that's clear. I'm not going to dwell on the methods. There's more than one way to grow a coral. The point of this slide is that we're always adapting and changing our methods. So while we primarily outplant with cement on old dead coral heads, we had an earthquake in '09. We lost like sheer cliffs of reefs underwater, and we were left with exposed dead staghorn rubble. So we adopted these domes from seascapers, and we put single genets of each species, again in close proximity, so when they grow up and spawn, hopefully they can reseed the area. And also it's over rubble so that when those pieces drop off, they can catch and grow, and that's been working. Most lately, we've worked with David Vaughn and adapted his methodology for completely in situ use. We don't have any land-based nurseries, and we're eliminating steps as we go, and I'll be talking in detail about this at 5 o'clock. 5 o'clock this evening. Long day. So the photograph on the left are 4-year-old outplants. The photograph on the right are 8 years, will be 8 years old next week. And this is what I want to talk about. How do we quantify this? How do we share this with our stakeholders? How do we share this with our colleagues? And a quick segue into survivorship, because people always ask me, what is your survivorship? With the acroporids, which are branching and asexually producing, we started with 19 pieces in '06. 2 of those died, the rest are still living. Before a hurricane in 2016, I was able to actually count the satellite broken pieces from the original living 17, and we had 48. Similarly, as we were putting out more elkhorns, we had 187 turn into 234. So how do you do that math? And again, that's before we had a minor hurricane event. With the staghorn and prolifera, it's even more graphic. We had these ropes with 40 little pieces that we outplanted in 2010. You can see in 2012 still the shape of the rope that we put on the reef, but now you can't even fit this giant stand of coral in a single photograph. And again, 40 little pieces on the rope are what we started with. Another example of how we don't know how to quantify this is another piece of rope laid on harvest, a heavy genotype on shallow degraded reef, and then just even a year and a half later, look how it's thriving and growing. How do we measure that? How do we talk about that? You saw some of these from Tali, the little elkhorns, and 4 years later, how big they are. Notice the staghorn in the bottom corner. While it's from us, we didn't actually put it there. Again, these corals naturally move around in high energy and then reestablish themselves. The other thing we're not able to talk about well is resilience and growth on the reef. So on the right, that took a tumble. That was a nursery-grown outplanted coral. took a tumble in Earl, and yet it's reestablished itself and is growing back faster than ever. What we can talk about and quantify are photomosaic data. This is a busy slide. Dr. Art Gleason has been doing our mosaic work for us, and Boston University has been helping annotate the results using CPCE. So we have 6 sites at Laughing Bird Key National Park. We've been doing annual photomosaics. They're reciprocal sites on the leeward and the windward side. I want to point out, just it's so busy that Site 9 only had 209 little pieces of staghorn put out in 2010, and today that's representing 36% live coral cover of a total of 39% live coral cover. These are pretty impressive results, and it's still not telling you the whole story. Laughing Bird Key has over 33 subsites with over 80,000 outplants, which we count as we put out there, but I hope you're getting the point that just counting these fragments doesn't really give you the full impression, and we're still trying to figure out how we can really share the amount of coverage that we have with you all. So since we're all scientists, you can look at this graph. Again, this is the mosaic data. The important part on this graph, 2014 through 2018, we're missing a few bars here, is that the sites on the left-hand side, 24 and 23, were unplanted before we first mosaiced in 2014, the red bars. All the sites on the right, 20, 21, 9, and 13, were already outplanted when we first mosaicked in 2014, and we did not add a single coral. I want you to get that point because this jump right here from red to orange represents natural asexual spreading and growth of these corals. We did not add anything to them in just a single year. On the left, of course, we put corals out, so you see a jump, but we didn't do anything. And then the drop on the yellow bar is again from Hurricane Earl in 2016, but look at the next big jump in blue. That is the recovery rate is even higher than the initial growth rate. And we don't like to talk about it so much, but these corals are adapted to slight disturbances. So if it's not a catastrophic event, it seems like these minor disturbances are actually promoting a faster growth rate with the acroporids. Go. Okay, so a chart is great, but pictures tell the real story, and we shared this in 2016, and this is the exact same elkhorn coral, and you can't even barely see the little baby staghorns. They were less than a year old in the first picture, and then now you see that kind of coverage. So I think that's a better story than the graph. There are lots of other associated biodiversities with organisms with the acroporids. Remember, they are foundation or keystone species. These big words are from Dr. Les Kaufman, who's not here, but these are all my photographs. And the point I want to make is that we are doing fish data collections. We're not just doing commercial species. It's difficult. We're looking at the blennies, the hamlets, every little thing that's associated with the acroporids. So it's taken a lot of time to really get that data together, and plus those fish move around so much. It's a little annoying. But the invertebrates we really love, and the crabs have been my latest obsession for at least 8 years now, and a lot of these crabs recruit to the nurseries, so when we move the corals from the nurseries, we're also moving the crabs with them, and thanks to Mark Butler and Jason Spadero, we now know that even the little crabs are really important macroalgae eaters, and on the bottom, the Spinosystemis is the big crab that we like to eat in Belize. We're hoping to move forward with a mariculture project in combination with restoration with that, and the reason I show the very bottom right-hand slide, hopefully you can see there's a little crab claw sticking out of the hamlet smelt. And again, people told me in the beginning you cannot restore a reef with only a few species, but when you have these foundation keystone species, you're putting back sort of the trees in the forest, and then the crabs are coming in, the fish are eating the crab, and they have habitat, and we actually are restoring an entire food web and ecosystem. People are more important, so it's not just me, it's all. I live in Belize over 20 years, so I work with Belizeans. We've had community consultations. We've decided that the Belizeans are trained and they get a stipend equivalent to a dive master pay. We're not doing volunteerism outside of Belize. We want to call it like a supplemental alternative livelihood income, we have a training course and manual vetted by the Belize Fisheries Department, and we offer that every year. And next month, Dave Vaughn is joining us to officially incorporate the microfragmenting techniques. There's a bunch of kids, so those numbers you saw are just rough estimates of the amount of students and people that we've taken out to Key. I'm not going to dwell on these numbers because, as I hopefully made clear to you now, when we put out these and we count the fragments that we put out, it's actually kind of meaningless. But we have scaled up, so we're in over 10 different sites in 3 or 4 different MPAs, and the circles around False and Moho Key represent unprotected areas that are long-term control experiments, because we really feel like the MPA, the no-take zone, is really, really important for restoration. And this video is looping to kind of show you all the critters that are involved. You know, there's a lot of things that eat algae out there, and that's why we think the no-take zones are really important. I didn't have time to talk about the predators like snails and fireworms, but those are eaten by other things that we like to eat. So if you're in an overharvest area, you often have an overabundance of the coral predators. I think I'm almost done. I don't see my timekeeper, so I guess it's a free-for-all. The other thing is, I want to emphasize is patience. We only outplant outside of the hurricane months, right? So even though these are fast-growing corals, we want to give them a chance to grip onto the reef. We also don't want to move them around when it's hot and they're already stressed or maybe bleaching, or cut them up and move them around. So we only outplant December through May, and we need certain weather conditions, so we have to operate within the context of Mother Nature. And the reason that we're using those Belizeans is not only because most of them live in poverty and they can use the money, but because when you use the same people over and over again, they get more efficient, they know what they're doing, and I can do more in one day with 4 or 6 trained Belizeans than I could with 30 non-trained non-Belizeans. So again, the video is just highlighting some of the extra critters that we think are important for a healthy reef ecosystem. People, we have a lot of help. Science, as I mentioned, we have a lot of outside people. Hopefully you know everyone in these slides, but the ones, Ileana Bombs is underwater there. She finally came to Belize this year, yay. And she can't see her. And also on the bottom right, underwater, is Harold Hudson, who was one of my first supporters and walked me through 4 years of waiting until I got my first permit to begin the work. And he also gave me the first methodology using the plaster of Paris as an accelerator with the cement. And hopefully you know everybody else. And then besides that, we have a lot of synergies and support. I just want to quickly mention that we do have a Meso-American Reef Restoration Network that's been reinvigorated. So that's Belize, Guatemala, Mexico, and Honduras. And we've been talking about reef rescue initiatives for a long time, meaning if a hurricane impacts your neighbor, if we start working with each other, we can go to our sites and help each other out. But most important to me is our local support. And so I live in Placencia, and this is a little accolade we got from the Placencia Village Council. I had to ask them forever 888867, what does that mean? That is the square miles in Belize, because some of you may or may not know there's a territorial dispute with Guatemala that's been flared up again. And this is all of our supporters. If your logo's not on here and I forgot you, please, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. And also, because I've got a little time, it's not all peaches and cream, and we have been battling this dredging that's been going on, primarily, I think, to accommodate cruise ship visitors. So we now have cruise ships coming to southern Belize, and this is live patch reef that has been being dredged. You can see the effects on some of the corals here, and let me just get to this. These are some of the mapped areas outside of protected areas near the dredging site. So these are the things that are in danger from dredging that we really want to step up enforcement on. Thank you.